This is my woodworking vise that I want to fit onto the bench. It's not the best bench to fit it onto. It's a bench made with a plywood top there. I've added a 2-inch timber. I wanted a 6 or 7x2 board put on top. Didn't have one to hand, so I've used a 3x2 and a 4x2 there. Cut out the notch to take the metal part of the woodworking vise. Added a packing piece underneath to give me the 3.5-inch depth, so the metal part of the woodworking vise is level with the top of this part. So that strengthens it. This is all screwed and glued together now, so that front part there is quite strong. I've got to look at stiffness in other ways. Now, the problem is I've had it round for a while. I've had it in this garage before I built the extension. And what's happened is the rails have got surface rust on. So I'm now going to look at how I take the rails out, because it would be easier to just clean off that surface rust if I can get them out of the vise itself. And what I can see is a pin there which holds the screw. But I don't see what holds this into there or into the front, at the front end. So I'll investigate that. If I take the pin out of there, then maybe I can knock this end off. So once you've taken the split pin out of the end of the screw on the vise, you can extract that by releasing the nut on the vise, and then hopefully now I'll be able to slide the jaws straight off, which will give me access to this bit that needs to be just have the surface rust taken off it, I think, before I put the vise back into operation. That's all I'm doing really. I can then, as I reassemble it, put grease onto all the bits that turn. Not shiny and bright, but the surface rust has been scrubbed off, lots of grease applied, and once it's screwed to the bench I can just slide it in and out a few times just to clean it up. Because this bit, once it's under the bench, is not going to get much maintenance. So plastering it in grease, I hope will just be a good thing for it. Just have to drill the holes and get the coach bolts, and I can try and attach it to the bench. It seems to be in all right. Now, the first time I drilled the holes, they weren't quite vertical. So I had to put the drill down and correct the holes. These two are 10mm coach bolts. These two are 12mm. It's weird the way these things come out, but the nuts I happen to have with the bolts happen to be different sizes. I needed to use deep sockets in order to tighten them up. I could have used a ring spanner or even open-ended spanner. But then with deep sockets I was able to tighten them up quite well. That is really quite tight on there now. I guess I could pull the head of this these couple of 12mm bolts down a little bit. Maybe I'll do that before I fully leave it, but it's lovely and solid onto the bench. Might be niggles about the fact that this metal part, if you're putting it onto a woodworking bench, should be below the top of the wood. So it should be packed down further. There is room underneath on the bolt length to be able to drop it and add a further amount of packing underneath the bottom of the vise if I did want to drop that down, but for what I'm doing, which is basically I just wanted to get the vise into use rather than rusting away in the garage, I've achieved that. And if I wanted to finesse it and drop it down so that metal bit is recessed a bit more, of course that would be perfectly feasible, and I could do that. And I think the other thing that if you're dealing with wood you would do is just sink the heads of the coach bolts down below the surface of the wood as well. However, it will do for my purposes for holding things in a vise, and I'll see. I'm not going to be doing any joinery. This is what you find when you're doing a job. I needed 2 drills. This drill will only go up to 10mm capacity in the chuck. That's the cordless drill. Could drill these 2 holes from my drill set, which goes from 1.5 to 10mm. I then needed another drill set. It happens to be an Imperial drill set, which has a larger drill there, and it had to go in my mains powered electric drill, which does not have, this one is not one, a sophisticated one, it doesn't have variable speed, so it tends to run too fast for such a drill size into wood. I then needed 3 socket sets. There's my smaller socket set, which was useful for getting the thing started. But my deep socket set happens to be an Imperial one. However, you can find an Imperial size in there, which is close enough to the across flats size of my metric nuts to be able to drive them in. But it's a 1/2 inch drive. Is it say 1/2 inch drive on there? Yeah, 1/2 inch square drive. And so I had to get another socket set out which has a 1/2 inch square drive, because the ratchet with this set only has a 3/8 and 1/4 inch drive, so wouldn't drive the deep sockets. So there we are. You just need such a multiplicity of tools for a simple job, which is drilling the holes to put some coach bolts in and tightening up the nuts.